Can we just talk?
Hi guys, welcome back to our DMUKup, and we have our guest Simon, who is a director of Center for English Language Learning. Right? Did I say it right?
You did,
Yeah. Yay. Okay, and now your turn, Simon. Could you introduce yourself for our viewers? Let's say in 3 words.
3 words?
Yeah. How would you describe yourself?
I would describe myself as loyal, lovely, and I was trying to think of another L word, but I can't think of another L word. I don't bite.
Oh, yeah, that is the most important one. Yeah. Our show is called DMUKup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what is in your cup today, and what is your usual go-to drink?
Well, it causes me no end of grief here because I like a double espresso, which is called a doppio, and I like it macchiato, which is with a little bit of milk on the top.
Yeah.
So the only place that I can get that is actually Starbucks, where if I say doppio macchiato, they give it to me. But everywhere else, I have to explain what I want. Oh. And I don't often get what I want.
Okay. After the interview, I could give you like a list of few places in Almaty.
Oh, please. Please. Yeah, I love my coffee.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and do you usually drink coffee every morning, like every day?
Yeah, I drink coffee throughout the day. And in fact, I have a coffee before I go to bed. Did you know 20% of the world's population are not affected by caffeine?
Oh, really?
80% are, but 20% are not. And apparently it's hereditary. So I'm like, neither of my parents are affected by caffeine, so I can drink a coffee at night. And
I envy you. This is so cool because when I usually drink coffee every morning, but if I have 2 or 3, then I become really anxious. So I just need one.
But you see, you've got that, because when I drink coffee, it doesn't give me a kick so much. It doesn't really do that. But I do love it.
Yeah,
I do love my coffee.
Drink coffee in the evening, I'm like, so what am I gonna do at 6 a.m.? Right. Okay, great. So, Simon, I know you had a really good and great life in terms of life experience, and so what is your story? What would you tell our viewers if we asked you to tell briefly about your life, just some kind of resume?
Well, I'm just trying to think what would be interesting. I'm English, I'm British, but I was actually born in Africa, in Zambia. And I grew up in Zambia and Nigeria and a little bit of time in Newcastle in the north of England, which is why I support Newcastle United. And then the rest of my life has been living and working overseas. So I did study. My undergraduate and postgraduate was in the UK, and I'd also lectured at the University of Exeter for 3 years, and I owned a house in Exeter and things like that. So I've spent little bits of time in the UK, but most of my life has been moving around the world.
Okay, let's go back to your teenage years. So I know that you took a gap year, right?
That's right,
so nowadays it's quite a popular decision, among teenagers, because they want to take some time, think about their future steps. But was it so common back then?
Well, it wasn't so common back then. I was very lucky because, my parents told me that if I didn't do well in my A-level exams, that's the exams you take at 17, that I would have to go back to school. And so I didn't think I was going to do so well in my exams. So I managed to I signed up to an organization called Project Trust. I think they're still going now. And they place young people in nice projects around the world, but you're in the same place for a whole year, usually teaching or working as support in children's homes, that kind of thing. But you get to live, it's a local salary, and you live in a very local situation, you learn the language and all of that. So I'd signed up to them, and I was not going back to school. That was it. And they sent me to Sudan. It was a really interesting project. It was I was working for an American organization called International Rescue Committee. Sounds like Thunderbirds are go, but they're quite famous. And they were working in refugee camps for Ethiopian refugees. And at that time, there were a lot of Ethiopians and Eritreans moving across the border into Sudan, escaping drought and all that kind of thing. This was the time of Band-Aid and all of that.
Yeah.
And so I worked in these refugee camps, and my job was to set up in 2 camps 2 bicycle repair shops. So the idea was it was like an income generating scheme that I'd train up these guys in bicycle repairs and do basic accounting and all that kind of stuff, and then let them carry on running these bicycle shops as a business. But it was great. I mean, it was tough. It was really, really tough. I lived in a mud hut, and they gave me I had a scooter. I was a bit of a rebel, and so I had a scooter. And I put leopard skin seat covers on it, and I had big antenna at the back, and I used to drive out to the refugee camps, and in fact there was a journalist came from the LA Times, and he did a piece on me. It was called Punk with a Purpose.
Yeah, that's a great headline. That's really cool. And that was the time when you developed your some kind of passion or just love for motorbikes, right?
Yeah. No, that was well. In fact, it was long before that. I was riding my dad's motorbike when I was about 12.
12.
So yeah. So
no
we lived
license.
we lived on this university campus in northern Nigeria. It's called Ahmadu Bello University, and it's huge. And so you could actually drive around. I used to go and visit my friends and stuff. But he hated it because he also used the motorbike, and he had this white helmet. And I painted it with all I don't know if you know about mods, but they have the target thing, and there's the jam and the who, and I had all this written on the helmet, and the poor guy had to go into work with this. Felt
really,
sorry for
really
him.
artistic.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about your other hobbies, apart from love for motorbikes? What do you like? So how do you spend your spare time?
Okay, well, I'm actually quite boring in a lot of those things. I like bird watching, so I'm quite passionate about bird watching, and I have a nice pair of binoculars, and I like going out and identifying birds. I have lots of bird books. I've got passion for bird books, actually. Sounds really boring, but it's great because it's about it's quite scientific in a way, because you have to identify the birds and you have to know where they're going to be and all those kind of things. So that's that. Gardening, I love gardening.
Do you take notes when
I
you
do,
work
I
watching?
do. I
So
keep
you have
lists.
a list
I do. But I am not a twitcher. Twitcher are people who like train spotters. They keep lists and lists and lists. But I'm not like that. But I do like to keep a record of what I see.
Yeah, and the gardening. Yeah, you started about this one.
Gardening. I love gardening. I've always tried to garden wherever I live, even if it's window boxes and things like that.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, it makes you, feel calm and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, actually, my family are all in Ireland, not the UK.
Really
so they're in
cool.
a beautiful part of Ireland in the southwest. My dad has about 5 acres of a mountainside, which he's created this most gorgeous garden. And I love spending time there. I mean, I absolutely adore, just hanging out, doing work. I don't mind doing grunt work in the garden, all the digging and heavy lifting and things. But it's really, really lovely. So yeah, nice part of the world. Just nice to just be in the environment.
Yeah.
Of course, hiking as well, like hiking, trekking. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, so I think Almaty suits you, right? Because you're a nature
Perfect.
person.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
I know that you came to Kazakhstan not so long ago, but have you had time, to travel across the country? Where have you been across the region?
Well, yeah, not much. We had a business trip to Nur Sultan, which was interesting, and that was at the AIFC courts. We're setting up a new center there, so that was nice, and I'd quite like to go back to Nur Sultan. It reminded me a little bit of Dubai and Abu Dhabi maybe 20 years ago. That kind of new buildings and stuff. But I'd like to go back there. But yeah, I've been around. Obviously done the more local stuff, the cable cars and up into the mountains here. I did one trek right across up. Oh God, I've forgotten the names of all these places. But I ended up doing 16 kilometers all the way across the mountains and down a gorge over there. I'm pointing. Sorry, I'm pointing at mountains.
Yeah, because we have like beautiful mountains there.
So went out to Colsai Lakes after stayed in with a homestay out there. So that was nice. And of course the Charon Canyon. Everyone has to go there. And what else? The Assi Plateau. So I drove up there, Turgan Gorge. That was beautiful. That was really lovely.
It's really cool.
And all the nomads are up there. You know, there's all the yurts and horses and everything going on. It's nice.
Yeah, you also like horse riding, right?
I do. When I was young, I used to own a horse.
Oh, that's really cool.
So I used to go riding every day. And then when I was in Oman, I used to go to the royal stables and I used to ride horses there as well. So that was also cool. I haven't ridden here yet, but I'm a little bit anxious. I'm feeling a bit old. If I fall off, maybe it'll take time for my bones to mend. So, but I'll give it a go. I think
you should try horse riding in the mountains.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Okay, Simon, like most of our viewers are teenagers, yes, and probably their parents. We hope so that parents are watching.
Okay.
Yeah, and we also want this kind of interview to be entertaining, you know, to show like more personal life of our staff and like professors, but also we want to talk about things that matter to them.
Okay.
Yeah, so my next question is, could you please tell about some of the toughest periods of your life and what have you learned from them?
Tough experience.
Toughest periods, tough experience, or maybe some time when you had no idea what to do next, like you've been lost and something like this.
Well, I mean, I can sympathize with that, and I think that, you know, when you leave school, you have all sorts of dreams, things that you want to do, but you know, a lot of it is quite difficult. I think we live in an age now where we can't expect a career, you know, to be in the same job or even the same field for the whole of our professional life. I think that so many young people now, well, even people my age, are changing their jobs at different stages and doing different things. And I suppose my message for young people, but also for parents, is, you know, don't have too many expectations early on. Yeah. And I think, you know, people will find their way in their life, and you know, if you change, that's also cool as well. I mean, when I left school, we talked about my gap year, and I went off to do that. I actually didn't want to go to university.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, I had another job with UNHCR, and my mother had actually filled in all my application forms. And I remember having a telephone conversation with her, and she was begging me to come back to England. She said, "Look, I've got these offers for you from Sussex University and School of Oriental African Studies in London." And she said, just come. So I was like, "Oh, okay, Mum." And I went to Sussex at the School of African and Asian Studies, and you know, I had a great time at university. But you know, also, I don't think I was really ready then to decide what I wanted to do. I knew vaguely I wanted to work in aid and development, for example, but I didn't know how or what that was going to be. I think, you know, I got into teaching kind of by accident. I had a little bit of a debt at the end of my what at the time was, well, I thought was a huge debt. It was £200.
Oh,
but of course now it's nothing. But I was worried about that, and I thought, I'll need to pay this back. So the best job I could get was teaching, actually.
And you liked it. Right? And you liked it.
Yeah, and I really liked it. And then I ended up going out to Italy, which was great, and I taught in Torino. And then after that, I went to Spain, to a place called Zaragoza, and that was really good. And then I came back, and it's interesting because I was offered a job with the civil service in the UK, because I wanted to work with the Department for International Development. So I was offered that, but I was also offered a place on a postgraduate teacher training course. And at that time in my life, I had to choose: do I want settled, pension, civil service, this, or do I want something a little bit more, traveling and all of that? And
more adventurous.
And I chose to do the teaching qualification.
Do you regret it?
Well, when I'm thinking about pension, I'm thinking, yeah, no, that would have been good. And actually, maybe I would have been in a more senior position in the government, etc. But actually, I don't regret it, because, your life is, you live your life for every job I've had. I've really loved my jobs. So, and I've loved where I've worked. I've loved the colleagues that I've met along the way. So, in that sense, I don't regret anything. I don't. But, throughout my career, if I look at it, I've usually come to a crossroads, and for some reason the universe always gives me 3 options and 3 roads to go down, and you have to choose.
Yeah.
And my philosophy of it is, you make the best decision at the time, and then if there's no point going back and thinking, oh, I wish I'd taken that route instead of this route, because actually at the time that was the best decision that you could have made. With hindsight, maybe I can't be bothered with that. So.
Yeah, and I think when we make decisions, it's kind of like we have this gut instinct. We listen to our inner voice,
That's right.
and we kind of feel on some level what is the best for us at what time.
And I think the universe puts opportunities in front of you, and it's up to you to decide. Do you want to go with this or not? But if you want something enough, it'll always come. Is the other way of looking at it. Yeah. I mean, for example. When I finished with the Ministry of Education in Oman, they wanted me to stay, but I realized I needed to move on in my career. And I was really desperate to get a job in South India on this project that I knew about, working in the States in southern India with the British Council. You'll laugh at this, but actually I flew out to Chennai so that I could see the office where I would work and meet the person who was leaving, who was in that job. I went to watch some cricket, actually, so the IPL, I went there. But and then afterwards, I visualized myself sitting there doing the work, etc. And of course, I got it, because that's how it works, So you've just got to want something enough and put yourself in that position, and you can actually achieve anything, really.
I do it sometimes. I'm not doing some stuff like affirmations or anything, but I have a picture of myself, for example, in not in 5 years, right, or 10 years, but just how I see myself maybe the next year.
Okay.
Just and actually it really also worked for me. That's really cool when you really want something, but you just not want and sit and wait, but you do and pursue.
You have to be a bit
find
proactive
a way,
as well. So
to get it.
I mean, to go back to your original question, I mean, I think for all the kids, students out there, just go with what you feel like, and don't be afraid of anything. And for parents, be patient. That's all I can say. My mum and dad were very patient with me, and they were very supportive. I mean, even my postgraduate, I got a scholarship from the British government to do my master's degree. They paid me a salary whilst I did my master's. The only reason I got that was my mum filled in the application form again.
Your mom is really cool.
She is very cool. Yeah.
We own it. Such mom in our life. And actually we had this question that we ask all the guests, if you could turn back time, and go back and meet your 18-year-old self, so what pieces of advice you could give him, right? And I think you already answered this question, but if you have something to add, because many people when they're 18, they have this pressure, and then you need to decide your future. This is one and only way, and it's really they become anxious, they become depressed and stuff. So because of lots of pressure around them. So what would you tell them if they're in this position?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, probably if I went back and met myself, I'd say do landscape gardening. Don't do the teaching, because I would have absolutely loved spending my life doing landscape gardening for people or working and for the National Trust or something. Yeah, I think for people, it's be easy on yourself. You know, do the things that you really love, because you know, I think you know, some people are driven by money, and that's okay. But if you do want money, then drive yourself towards that direction, if that's your primary objective. I've never wanted money. I mean, just enough, you know. So I think if I'd wanted money and to be rich, I would have been rich. And I think it's like that. So I think, you know, do the things that you love, and you know, love yourself.
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah. Just, you know, respect yourself and love yourself and listen to yourself. Yeah, and speaking of money, so how do you maintain work-life balance?
How's that to do with money?
Like, because, like, for example, people who, like, they want to earn more and they forget about their life, like personal life, their families. They don't spend enough time with them, and they just work and just have new goals again and again, and they don't stop.
Well, I think I really do believe in work-life balance. You know, when I'm at work, I work really hard. I do, you know, I have targets. I do my job. I interact with people. I'm very successful, I think, in what I do, and I think part of the reason I can do that is that I also look after the other part of my life as well, and I really treasure my holidays. I treasure my time off. You know, and I think work-life balance is really really important. And I think, you know, for me as well, enjoying the moment. So that's about living the day, whether you're at work and then when you're at home. You never know when your day is going to be the last day. I mean, when I was in Muscat in Oman, my kids were growing up there, and I will forever be grateful to the Ministry of Education there, because we finished work at 2:30. They finished school at 2. We started early. We were you know, work at 7 o'clock in the morning, but we finished by 2:30. And you know, I spent their childhood basically. I spent so much time with them. Like, we used to go to the beach in the afternoon, or the swimming pool, or we'd go and do stuff. Weekends would be camping, going into the mountains or to the beaches. And you know, I think I really treasured the time that I had with them growing up. You know, they're only 4 years old once, they're only 8 years old once, they're only 12 years old once, and I think for me that was a really sort of precious experience.
Yeah, that's a good answer, because like yeah, I remember my studying like in Poland, and once we had our like classes just 3 times a week, but of course it was like from morning till evening every day, but we have like 4 days a week just for us, because every week we traveled around Europe. Yes, and now I'm really happy that I did it, that I wasn't just sitting at the dormitory, I don't know, watching some TV series, because now I have the best memories. Yeah, because like I used every opportunity, you know, to explore the world, because you can be like an undergrad student once. Yeah, of course you can do more, I don't know, like go to another university and stuff, but that first experience is just, you know, you have only one like first experience. Yes, and everything. Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for your answer.
Okay,
that's a lot to think about. Okay, Simon, it's time for rapid fire.
Oh dear.
So yeah, I'm gonna ask you just a few quick questions and answer them.
I'll get ready.
Yeah, they're pretty simple. Yeah. So the first one: if you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would you choose?
Oh, I'm not very good at these kind of questions, because there's like a million people come in to my mind. I think Nelson Mandela.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
why?
Yeah. Just because I grew up in Africa. I mean, I grew up I was born in Zambia, which was actually into independent Zambia. But you know, across the border there was Rhodesia and South Africa, and I think Nelson Mandela has always been a hero, and he's just such an inspiration. So I think for me that would be the one.
Oh, and also, like, speaking of inspiration, my next question, what are your sources of inspiration?
I've got really boring sources. I mean, my kids are a great source of inspiration for me. They constantly surprise me, and
that's what kids do.
Yeah, and I absolutely love them. And of course, my wife, she's not just an inspiration, but she's just a rock and support for me, and she sort of keeps me going.
Really cool.
So I think those are a little bit like personal, not sort of outside things, but yeah. Maybe I'll say those.
No, that's a great answer. I think like we all find inspiration from the people that we love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And next one, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
And my superpower would be to transport myself anywhere in the world, like Star Trek, you know, sort of just to transport myself around the world, because there's so many places I'd like to visit. And also I'd like to just be able to pop in on people like my mum and dad, or, you know, my kids, just go and see them for the weekend, you know, but there's so far distances to travel. So actually just being able to transport yourself into different places, that would be my superpower.
That's cool. Top 3 countries in your bucket list.
Ooh, are these places that I've been to or that I've never been to?
You've never been, but you want to visit.
You see, I spent 3 years in the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific, and I would love to go back there again. So if you ask me a bucket list, these are but if I had to be somewhere different, then I would say, okay, another place in the South Pacific, maybe Vanuatu or somewhere like that. I'd love to go back to the Pacific. Again, another country I've been to, but I desperately want to go back to is Bhutan, which is, you know, in the Himalaya, and I just thought it was a magical country. So to go back there, but on the bucket list.
Okay, let's say one place.
One more place. Okay, let's think.
But you've never been to.
Well, you see, all the places that were on my bucket list I've actually been to, like New Zealand or Australia, or, you know, there's a
happy person. It's really cool.
So let me trying to think where else. Maybe Antarctica. I quite fancy Antarctica, and maybe the Falkland Islands, not because of a British thing or anything, but just that southern ocean and being in Antarctica. I think that would be amazing. You know, the penguins, and much better than the Arctic, because you've got
sounds so great. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, and the last one, if you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Dal.
Oh.
Yeah, it's dal and rice. I'd happily eat that every day, and I have eaten it for many days. So,
and you'll never get tired.
I don't think I'll get tired of it, because well, if you have to eat the one meal every day, I might as well eat that one. It's got protein. The rice has got carbs, and I think I'd do okay on that. I'd be a lot trimmer than I am now without the chocolate and whatever else that I'm eating.
That's a benefit. Okay, thank you, Simon, again for this interview. It's really cool talking to you. And I have the last question. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Being a nice person. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I just, you know, I don't necessarily expect people to be my friend or to love me, but to actually just think that I'm a nice person.
Just be kind to everyone.
Be kind, exactly.
That's cool. So that is a super ending for our interview. Be kind, people. And thank you for watching.
Be kind to yourself and be kind to other people.
First be kind to yourself, and then to people that are around you.
Yeah.
So thank you again for being with us, for watching this DMUKup series, and see you next time. Bye. Thank you, Simon.
Bye.